It will. All right. I love it when it says you are live because I'm always uncertain as to whether I've actually started it or not. So hopefully if you are watching us, you are seeing all three of us. I just want to say welcome, 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 because this is an evening with two of my all-time favorite authors, David Swinson and Ed Aymar. Tonight, they'll be discussing David's new book, City on the Edge, which was released today. City on the Edge is a departure from David's previous books. David, I'm going to ask you to just mute yourself for just a second there. There we go. Perfect. And then you can talk all you want after I'm done. City on the Edge is a departure from David's previous books, the Frank Mark crime series, which is set here in DC and draws on his knowledge and experiences as a Metropolitan Police detective in the Major Crimes Division. City on the Edge also draws on David's history, but in a different way. He's grew up the son of a Foreign Service officer and lived in places such as Washington, D.C., Beirut, Mexico City, and Stockholm. So City is set in Beirut and features the son of a Foreign Service officer. And I'm sure Ed and David will talk about how City draws or doesn't draw on David's personal experiences growing up in Beirut. Now, whenever David has been at One More Page, my introductions usually run very, very long because his life fascinates me. So I'll just read this time the first few lines of his bio and stop. Swinson began his career at the height of the punk rock movement in the early 1980s. After attending California State University as a film major, he booked and promoted punk rock and alternative music at Fender's Ballroom, Melody Dance Center, and Bogart's Nightclub in Long Beach, California. He also started the Wednesday night evenings of conversation and spoken word at Bogart's with luminaries such as Hunter S. Thompson, Dr. Timothy Leary, John Waters, and Jim Carroll. And I just want to say, David, I would totally read your autobiography if you wrote one. So just throwing that out there. David is joined tonight by Anthony Award nominated author Ed Aymar, who has been a huge supporter of One More Page and indie bookstores in the area. His most recent thriller, They're Gone, was published in 2020 under the pseudonym E.A. Barnes. They're Gone received high praise from a variety of popular trade reviews, including Publishers Weekly, BuzzFeed, a starred review from Kirkus, the Washington City Paper, and many more. His columns, Decisions and Revisions, appears monthly in the Washington Independent Review of Books. He is a former member of the National Board of the International Thriller Writers. He is an active member of the Crime Writers of Color, Mystery Writers of America, and Sisters in Crime. He also runs the Noir at the Bar series for Washington, D.C., which he has very generously, focused on different independent bookstores throughout the area to highlight them and to send sales their way. And he has hosted and spoken at a variety of crime fiction writing and publishing events nationwide. Enough talking from me. You want to hear from these two gentlemen. I just want to let you know that if you want to put any comments or questions or to say hi to Ed or David, you can do that in the comment section and they'll be able to see that. And without further ado, I'm going to remove myself and turn it over to Ed and David.
That was such a nice introduction. Thank you so much. And this is really exciting for me because I've known David ever since probably right after your first book came out, I guess, and or your first book in the your first DC police book came out, The Second Girl, and I am so excited to have the opportunity to talk with you about City on the Edge, which I had an opportunity to read an advanced copy of, and I love, and it's such a departure from you. I think it's utterly fascinating. So I have a ton of questions for you, and I'm completely going to put you on the spot. And I sent them to you earlier, but then I thought of some new ones, so I'm sorry. Oh, you're still muted. We're going to trade being muted.
I didn't study your questions at all, so I wanted to be spontaneous.
Perfect. My first question for you is, and this was mentioning in the intro. This is such a departure from you. What led to it? Was it a creative decision? Was it a business decision? Was this novel always, the kind of burning a hole inside you and had to come out?
It was number 3, without a doubt. It's a book I've been wanting to write since my 20s, and I have had several different versions of it over the years, which sucked, for various reasons. I hadn't really honed my skills as a writer until, it was signed to Mulholland. But I didn't really do it as I did it as a departure in a way. I wanted to get away from this pandemic era type thing, and I wanted to go back, and I just felt it in me that this was the right time. And fortunately for me, my editor Josh Kendall loved the idea, and the timing was right, and I wrote it. I mean, when writing it, I thought it sucked. I really didn't expect a lot of the reviews that it's been getting, and in comparisons, like the spy genre. I can understand coming of age, but thriller to a certain extent, and mystery, but not spy. I guess the father lends to that aspect.
That's interesting. And I want to go away from what my scripted questions were quickly, because there's something I was wondering, and that's, you've had, your books with Mulholland have received a lot of critical praise, and you've had terrific successes. You're also, as far as I know, super modest and very, you don't come off as somebody who is who wants to prove yourself or challenge other people. I mean, there's a very much a laid back regard to you. Do you so how is the success that you've received a surprise to you in any way? It's not to those of us who've read your work, but to you, as the writer.
I mean, the critical acclaim, I really am uncomfortable with even saying that I received critical acclaim. I mean, yeah, it is a surprise. I'm surprised, that the New York Times has loved my previous books as much as they have, and I'm surprised that the Washington Post gave this one such a rave review. I mean, I'm always surprised, and I think we all are as writers, aren't we? I mean, there's a lot of fear, that we have, and I have that fear all the time. I'm not, I'm not someone that, I mean, I want to be recognized, obviously, because I want to continue to write, but I don't need, and so the praise comes with it. I mean, obviously, because it helps me to continue to write, but it does, because I'm the same as I was before, before I started writing, except now I write, and, but, I mean, I hope that answers your question. I don't know. I get uncomfortable with that a little bit.
I think your discomfort with that question exactly answers my question. And one of the things that I find, really interesting about you, most writers have a connection to their work, something that of themselves that's grounded in it, even if it's sort of a tangential thing. Um, and with you, it seems a little more direct, from the outside. And I find that as another writer, very daring, because I don't like to, I feel very uncomfortable with that kind of openness. You, you know, seem to really kind of have a willingness to peer into the abyss. So what, there's your, your police background that informed the Frank books. What of your childhood really informed this book?
I did grow up in Beirut for a few years. My father was with the Foreign Service. It is directly related to certain experiences. I was a part of, during the curfew time, and we were evacuated in, I think, 75. And so a lot of what happened in there was based on my experiences, but it's still fiction. I mean, obviously I didn't witness a murder. But I did witness, the bombings and, the shootings and, all that kind of stuff. I mean, hear it. And I witnessed one in particular, which is actually in the book. But it's not I don't like to look at it as semi-autobiographical, because it's not. It's fiction. I mean, but it's based on experiences, and that's how I write. I mean, I'm not Frank Marr. I mean, I don't do cocaine. I don't go, like bust into drug boys' homes, for cocaine. But a lot of the cop heart, that the good part of Frank Marr, there's a lot of bad in him, but a lot of the procedural and, the stuff that is police related is based on experience. So that's the type of writer I am. I mean, I can research, and I admire those people that can like write these incredible freaking books based on research. I just, I'm not a good researcher.
I find it daunting, and it's something I've been thinking about lately, because I just finished a book by Karen Slaughter. It's fantastic, the Good Daughter, and there's so much research in it. And as a writer who really tries to avoid research, I find it really daunting, and impressive, that somebody would, is willing to go to those links, because, as a writer, that if there's a mistake in your book, your readers are going to point it out to you, occasionally gleefully. So it's, it's something that I'm very aware of. But this book, Sitting on the Edge, seems like it would have a lot of research to capture the city as well as you did. I mean, how did you do that? Was that based off memory, or did you have to actually, sort of shrug off that unwillingness to do research and open some books?
It's based on memory and photos, and my album, my freaking yearbook. I mean, from the American Community School there. I mean, that had a lot of stuff in Beirut there. I mean, we did, as a part of the school, we did go to the Litany River. I did camp there with my dad, going uptown to Alhambra, as kids, to get shawarmas and, I mean, incredible Lebanese food, that's all real. The Mediterranean Sea across from the Corniche and the reefs, and, and snorkeling on the reefs. I mean, did all that. So it's based on the time, the mid 70s, and, it's been rebuilt since then, but I've heard that I want to go back. I've heard it's been rebuilt even better. I mean, the Phoenician Hotel is still there, the Holiday Inn is pretty much, I don't know if they rebuilt that, but so it's based on my memory of the time and my recollection, inspired by photos and, and other things. And actually even reaching out to, I have a lot of friends on Facebook who are American Community School friends. And I'd ask, do you remember this? I mean, did we really do this? I mean, did we really, because it's almost like unbelievable. Did we really freaking sleep on the floor? Because it's almost like you make that up in your head as later on in life, like, oh, I had, that was just I keep using the word adventure, but I mean, in a way, it's looking back at it now. And I've mentioned this before in interviews, and looking back at it now, it's just terrible. I mean, what happened there? I mean, it's awful. I mean, people were dying all over the place, you know. I mean, Muslims, Christians, Jews. I mean, people were dying, and you didn't look at that as a kid. You just saw the plumes of smoke coming up in the distance, and you heard the gunfire. You didn't know that there was death behind that. You know, you just knew that you were in the middle of a war zone, and you know your parents were too busy to watch you, and you snuck out during curfew. You know, and but now looking back, it's, you know, I mean, nothing's really changed. I mean, it's still going on. You know, and it's not as I wanted to capture the innocence, you know, of being a 12-year-old kid there, you know, and I hope I did that.
And that, to me, yeah, I mean, you know, you mentioned a couple of things I wanted to touch on. One is, this is one of my interests as a reader and as a writer, is how people approach and react to trauma. And your book opens with this, you know, really unsettling scene, where a murder is witnessed by the protagonist, and that's not a spoiler because it's the very first, the very first. I don't think it's the first chapter. Maybe I don't think it's a prologue technically, but and as I was reading that, you know, you did the thing that I think we really try to do as writers, which is I completely believe that happened. You described it so well, and it was so um, it was so evocative, and you did it from the perspective of a child, um, who didn't quite understand what he was seeing, but what he was seeing was going to obviously haunt him later, and something that he would try to understand over time for probably throughout his whole life. Yeah, how did you? I had two questions about that. One was that voice, was that perspective, uh, the like your initial approach to the novel, or was it something that you had to determine, like were you going to go third person, first person? And then second, and I hope you remember this because I'll try to remember it if you forget it. But how did you decide to? Was that the always going to be the opening for the book?
No, that wasn't the opening, and the opening didn't work. It just wasn't. It was too descriptive and too, you know, just jumping right into. I think to where it opens in the first chapter. That was the original opening, and so I knew I had to like set it up. You know, what really inspired me, you know, with this book was the body, and a lot of people know that as Stand By Me by Stephen King. In the body, you know, you have, you know, this whole idea of these kids, you know, the whole suspense is the body that they're going to see, and you know that they want to it takes them overnight to get there, and I wasn't in the I didn't have that suspense element that King got, and I think the first few pages of the body with that dead body that they wanted to go see, about, you know, did you hear about such and such who got killed? So I wanted to create a certain suspense that this happened, and then go back to the beginning and work it out that way. I mean, is that answering your question? I know there were two other questions, but I forgot the first one.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. The first one was regarding the voice of the book. You know, how did you come to it? Was it just how you initially started writing it and that grew on you, or did you have to sort of try on a few different hats to find how best to approach the story?
I had to try on a few different hats. I mean, it was first person the kid's perspective at first, and almost present tense, and that didn't work at all. I've always loved present tense, and then it became more reflective, and I thought that because being more reflective, I like the idea of being able to go back to his adulthood at times and going back and forth to like periods in his life, later on and then early on.
One of the I mentioned I talked earlier about the success you've had, and as somebody who writes in crime fiction, it's been, and who considers you a friend, it's been wonderful to see this book. When I was reading it, I was thinking, there's definitely a mystery within it that starts in the opening pages and develops, and there's obviously the setting of a war-torn environment, or a burgeoning war environment. Did you have thoughts about writing this outside of crime fiction?
No, I always wanted to really keep the mystery element in there, the crime fiction element in there. I never dreamed that it would get comparisons to a spy, that whole spy genre. Again, based on the dad part mostly. And I always thought there'd be some sort of coming of age element, but I always liked the idea of this 12-year-old kid. And I never really thought of coming of age, just this whole mystery, revolving around these kids. And at first it started off where they were going to try to solve this mystery. And I guess they did in their own way, but realistically, they're not going to fricking solve this mystery. They're not going to do that. It's going to happen accidentally, or it's going to happen not accidentally. It's going to happen through by other means. So that part just wrote itself.
One of the things you mentioned earlier was, growing up in Beirut and how much you remembered. Yeah, and I want to touch on this really quick because I thought it was so fascinating. You mentioned you have Facebook friends who grew up in that American school. Beirut. When I was a kid, between, I don't remember ages, but I remember grades. I was between 5th through 7th grade. My father was in NATO, or he was with the army, but he went to work with NATO, and we lived in Portugal. And that was 5th through 7th grade. And most of those kids that were in that school, that American International School of Lisbon, we're still friends. It's crazy because you have friends from high school, you expect that, friends from college. I don't expect to have a group of friends who I also have a lot in common with from 5th, 6th, and 7th, 3 years of my life. And we were passing it out. So for some of them, it was 2 years, but we're really good friends still. And there's a huge group on Facebook for everybody who went to that school. And I found when I came to the States that some of that intimate, when I returned to the States, and I for 8th grade in high school, some of that intimacy that I had was lost. It was very unsettling to return. It is, and I'm curious, has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, the relationships changed. Everyone grew up. I'm not so much friends with some of the really, really close buddies and gals, friends that I had there. One of the girls I wish I was still friends with, my first girlfriend. I say that sarcastically. But in partly. But everyone else, we grew up, and even some of us that weren't really great friends at the American Community School, we've become friends through Facebook because we went to ACS, and lived in Beirut at that time. People that lived there, I think before me, that I did do this research, there were a lot of celebrities that lived there. Keanu Reeves lived there as a kid. I looked at the yearbook. He wasn't in the yearbook, so I think he was after me. But the Copelands, Stuart Copeland, Miles Copeland from the Police, they were there, and I think they were there before me because they weren't in my yearbook, my 2 yearbooks either. but and also Greg Kinnear, he lived there. So there were, I mean, I'm not friends with him. I mean, but, I'm sure if I met him, we'd have a lot to talk about. But just living there at the time is what brought us together on Facebook, and a couple of them I was okay friends with, but not best friends. So yeah, I did. There was, I mean, that whole camaraderie type thing isn't really, you know, there on Facebook. It's just an experience that we all share in common.
One of the things you mentioned about that experience was that you were there during the shootings and the bombings, and that was one of my issues with the book, and not an issue in the sense of a criticism, just something that I loved Graham's father. I thought he was terrific, and I just hated personally that he was keeping his son in this environment. And I wondered if that was something that you and I remember, as I mentioned, my father was military, so there were occasionally dangerous situations where either we were in, although we were fairly safe, and removed, or he went to Desert Storm, so he was in danger. But for as seeing it through both sides, seeing it as a kid who grew up that way, and now as a father who has a kid that I would never want to expose, was that a difficult element to write? How did you approach that, or am I seeing something that was just kind of matter of fact to you?
It was matter of fact. It was a time, and also we were evacuated during the before the real trouble began. We were in danger. Going out during the curfew, or going on the balcony. I mean, I get punished if I was caught on the balcony. Because there were snipers. I'd get in a lot of trouble. So, but I don't look at it like he was keeping us in danger, because we were evacuated before the real trouble began. I think, like the Holiday Inn and stuff like that. But it was a time where, I mean, the 70s, it was a different time. I mean, like, and I think my dad took it for granted, since we had a nanny and all that kind of stuff, that we were obeying, and we were, in this safe environment. The building was safe. I mean, there was a part I don't want to give up that was actually real, but I wasn't there. We were evacuated at the time when certain elements tried to kick in doors and stuff like that. Street gangs, pretty much. But we were long gone by that time. But I used that. So my father was very protective, but it's I mean, for instance, his next post was Saigon during the fall. He didn't take us there. I mean, we stayed in the United States. He's not he wasn't that foolish. Hey, we're going to Saigon. You're gonna love it. I mean, it is sort of funny that a lot of the places that he was stationed were trouble spots. I mean, Mexico City, close to Yucatan, close to Cuba during that whole, brinkmanship era and stuff like that. I was a very small kid. But Mexico City was totally safe. It was like, back then there were no cartels, or anything like that. You could run around in your sandals and shorts, shirtless, and in Beirut too. In the beginning, it was, we weren't in danger of getting kidnapped, and although American diplomats, were, and one who was a partner of my father, was kidnapped for, I think, 3 years. So there was that element, but we were taken out of it pretty quickly.
Talking about the the father and about the characters, how they all approach trauma. Yeah, the Graham's mother. I mean, I've been calling him the kid, and so his name's Graham. His mother is, is dealing, and I don't want to say, I don't want to reveal anything. If you want to expand on it, you can. But she's dealing with a trauma to their family, and it seems to have completely upended her. What led to her to her character, to your decision to write her that way?
I needed the trauma. I didn't want it to be as simple as a divorce, a breakup. I come from a divorced family, and I just, that happens. But I mean, I needed the trauma that happened early on in life to create a character that was emotionally broken and from it, and because that was really an easier way for me to deal with the mother being who she was, rather than having it be just as simple as they don't get along anymore, they want to separate, or they want to divorce.
With do you consider, there, you touched on the nanny they had, and I don't want to do any spoilers, so I won't. Let's say this later. I'll say that I want to ask you a question about the ending of the book without saying anything about the ending of the book. So I'm going to phrase this kind of like with the beginning. I thought the end was just such a beautiful note. It felt like a note held at the end of a song that just stays long after all the instruments have faded out. I was really kind of shaken when I finished it in the best way. And kind of like with the intro, did you know the ending? Were you always going to end it there, or was that something that changed?
No, I was always going to end it there. That part is pretty much autobiographical. It's very sad. I mean, when you're a kid, the nannies are not housekeepers. They're not, people that clean and cook for you. They're your relatives. They're your family. And this person was my family, and so I always knew I had to end um, on that note, because it was pivotal, and like in you know in my relationship with, I mean, still, I mean, I think about her, and I mean, she was my first crush, I mean, for real, and I mean, obviously, it's, being 12, or, I was younger, but being, even back then, being 12 is different than being 12 now. I don't think it's the same. Um, but yeah, he had to have that crush, and in that moment that was equally crushing.
This reads like very much like a standalone to me, but there are hints at more stories to be told without giving anything away about the characters or their fates. Do you have plans for any of the characters at the end to reappear in other works, or to continue this story?
I'd like to be like Tana French, where I can do that successfully. I could see Graham as an adult detective, definitely, or a retired detective, falling into something. Um, I don't see them as the same kids, going on to another grand adventure in Mexico or Stockholm or Mallorca or something like that, because that to me is unrealistic. I just, that they would always fall into some sort of, mystery or something like that. But I could definitely see Graham as an adult coming back at some point.
You know, is this book in any way, it lends itself to thoughts of commentary on the American involvement in the Middle East. But on the other hand, it doesn't seem like there is any kind of direct comment. You're not saying that there is any kind of it doesn't seem to have like a definite argument one way or the other, but the arguments are presented. Did you see it anyway as a commentary on American involvement in the Middle East?
Not at all. I mean, honestly, I just wanted it to be a simple story about a kid, growing up there. And there has been, like in certain commentaries, certain reviews that, that has been raised, and that's just purely accidental on my part. I think with the father, especially, and sort of the hints of what American involvement was.
One thing I'm interested in with this book, especially because I know you said that you don't feel for you that it's as abrupt a departure as some readers may. And I've been thinking lately. I've been talking with friends about being professional writers, and particularly, before you're published, you're really writing by yourself. You might have a writers group, but you don't have a professional weighing in. And then when you get published, depending on who your agent is, like my agent is very much an editorial agent. So I know I'm going to get comments back. She's not just going to take it and pass it on to an editor. And I've talked to writers who work hand in hand with an agent or with an editor when they're crafting a story. And I know that you and Josh, I believe, is your editor, are close. How do you two work together?
We're very much collaborative. I mean, if I died in the middle of a book, he could finish it without a doubt. He knows my voice, he adds his, there's a lot of what he brings up that I value. And my agent too. I mean, my agent, will read something, and there's been a lot of stuff that has been not passed around. Where, are you sure you want to pass this? Are you sure you want me to put this around? And I go, well, I guess not. But I have a very good arrangement with Josh, and I totally respect him, and I trust his opinions, and he's an incredible editor. He doesn't change my story. He just adds different elements to it, like, hey, what about this, or what about this? But I write it, but he comes up with things that I never thought of. So yeah, it is very collaborative.
Do you ever have, given that process, and given how, particularly, since your work draws from your experiences so much, do you ever have any really strong differences you have to resolve?
Not resolve, but just like, I don't agree with that, and it's as easy as that, and it's a respectful type, not respectful. It's just like, okay, unless, and the second girl, there was originally Frank Marr kills. I'm not giving anything up because this part didn't happen. He kills Playboy at the end. He shoots him right in the center mass, right in the chest. And Josh goes, does he have to kill him? That changes everything. That changes it all. and gave a valid, incredible argument as to why he shouldn't. And I think because of that, Frank Marr became a lot more likable. But if he would have said, Frank Marr needs to kill this guy, and I don't kill him, I'd disagree, and I wouldn't. So I mean, that's the type of relationship we have.
That's awesome. I've known writers who have that relationship with their editors, and to me it's working with somebody like I work with my agent, and we're very much in concert when it comes to before a book goes out. But I find it so it's still strange to me because I don't know. I've never been a writer's group type of person. I've never been somebody to really. I've worked with friends that I've traded work with them and read and taken their comments, but it's not like a regular thing. I don't have a regular group that meets every Wednesday or something. It seems wonderful, but it does take some getting used to. Was it that way for you, or was it just was it something that you were open to, especially given your background with music?
I've always been collaborative. I've always liked, because originally, before I became a cop, I got my degree in film, and I wanted to be a filmmaker. So, during that whole, be a screenwriter. So that's all collaboration, and, I would write screenplays with friends and stuff like that. And that whole brainstorming type stuff is incredible, so I've always been that type of person. I've always sought that, so to find, someone like Josh in the beginning, the way beginning in Long Beach, California, were you there in Long Beach for BoucherCon?
No, I didn't go. I started going to BoucherCon the year after, and everybody told me, because everyone was like, "You missed out on Long Beach."
Yeah.
So I hit up Charlotte or Raleigh, I forget, but yeah, not the same.
Yeah, I think it was Raleigh. Yeah, I missed the second one, but even then, I knew this was the type of guy I wanted to work with, and I didn't know if anything was going to happen at the time. And fortunately for me, it did, because you have that kind of a connection, and there have been a lot of writers in the past who have had that type of connection. I'm not comparing myself with those famous writers, but have had that connection with their editors, and I think it just improves everything. If you trust, but it doesn't mean you agree with everything.
So given, we've talked about music a little bit, and just, I mean, as friends we have, and it was mentioned in your bio by Elaine that your past working with rock and roll in LA. Do you have a playlist for a book? Is there music you listen to that you return to that informs it?
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. I mean, Frank Marr was mostly Nick Cave, all the way. And I actually booked Nick Cave at Bogart's nightclub in Long Beach, I think 2 times, along with, acts like the Pixies and, Throwing Muses and, so I always have a playlist, but that playlist is always connected to my past or music that I'm listening to now, like Andrew Bird or whatever. But for like City on the Edge, it was all music from the 70s. It was America. It was Jethro Tull. It was, as much as I hate to admit it, it was Bread and the Archies. I mean, I know Alex Segura will approve that. Yeah, I loved the frickin' Archies when I was that age. So that would be the playlist for City on the Edge right now, and Velvet Underground.
So did you find, when you when was this book finally finished? Was it pre-pandemic or was it during the pandemic? And did the pandemic alter any of that did that shift change anything for you in your writing this book?
I think this book ended pre-pandemic, but I think the editing process went through the pandemic, part of the pandemic period. Because as you know, I mean, publishers, it takes, like a year for it to get published. And, I was not influenced at all by the pandemic with this, except comparisons that were maybe inadvertent, later on during a rewrite, the curfew. I mean, the curfew was a lot like what we were going through with the pandemic, where we, were just secluded and, and had to stay in this one area all the time.
We had a question that I wanted to get to, and I also wanted to mention, if anybody, we're coming up to close to the end of the interview, so if anybody has any questions, just please post them in the comments, and we'll get to them. But one of the ones here is, did you receive any pushback from your agent or publisher about shifting from Frank Marr to your new book?
Did I see any?
Did you get any pushback? Were they like, no, continue with Frank and put this off for later, or did they welcome it?
They welcomed it. I mean, they were, and Josh and I think other people maybe, but as far as I know, it was my agent and Josh were in agreement that you can take Frank Marr only so far. Really, I didn't know how much further to take him than the third book. I mean, if he ever comes back, he's going to come back in third person with a partner, and that partner will be, someone who's in the first and the third book, who he killed the first time but didn't kill. So I sort of like give that up. But I don't know if Frank's going to come back. There was no pullback from that at all. I really thought that they would not be in favor of me writing a book like this, at all, because it was such a departure from what I write. Because I am an ex-police detective, so stick with that genre. I mean, stay with it. In a way I did, because it's a detective looking back at his childhood. So yeah, I was actually very surprised.
And when did you start writing on I suppose a serious, basis? I mean, what was I don't think I've, ever heard that from you. When you actually, was it during your cop years? Was it prior to that, or?
I was 17 years old when I wrote my first book. It was called The Apple Tree. It was 386 pages, and I thought I was going to die when I finished it. So I said this was a book to end all books. Who said that? Not James L. What's it? This is the devil dog of all books. Now I forgot. He said that to Otto Penzler in Mysterious Books. But I thought that it was, until I got rejected. And I swear I had that rejection letters from Little Brown and Company. And I'm still trying to find that rejection. It destroyed me. I wrote it when I was 17. I got rejected when I was 18. I never wrote again until my 20s. So I always knew in the back of my head I was going to be a writer, whether it be screenplays or whatever. I didn't think I'd, jump into the punk rock scene, alternative music scene, and then after that become a cop, I confess I originally became a cop because it was something I really wanted to do. First of all, I didn't think I'd stay as long as I did. I just wanted to get experience to write, but I ended up loving being a cop. It got in my blood, and I loved the work I did. But it honed my skills as a writer. I mean, seeing the best and the worst of humanity. Mostly the best. I mean, a lot of bad, but there was a lot of good too.
So you mentioned that this book was finished pre-pandemic. What have you been working on since then? I understand if you may not want to, discuss too much about it, but is there another book coming out, and can you give us any information about what it might be?
Punk rock noir.
Really?
1986, 1987, and it's still in my head. It's a work in progress in my head with a few notes, but definitely a PI thing, doorman / PI, definitely a club, definitely Hunter S. Thompson and Timothy Leary and G. Gordon Liddy, and all these people. I hope legally I can bring into the book in some capacity. And again, based on my experiences, but involving a total fictional tale.
So how often do you write? You mentioned that that's in your head. Are you a everyday writer? Do you write when the story's just bursting out of you? How do you do it?
There was a time pre-pandemic where I would sit down, when my daughter was in school at like 10 a.m. and then until my wife would take her to school, I'd pick her up. So that would be my writing time, like 10 a.m., 11 a.m. until like 2. And it was every day. And sometimes I would just stare at the page and nothing would come out, but at least I'd be there and I'd be at that space all the time. COVID really affected me. I mean, I have to be honest with you. I'm having a hard time, finding that space right now, but it's in my head, and that's where all the books have begun. All of them began in my head, and then copious notes, and then once I start writing and I break that threshold, I mean, maybe you feel the same way. Tell me. I mean, like for me, it's like 10,000 words. Once I get past 10,000 words, it's a breeze. But if I can't break that, it's just sometimes takes forever. So no, I'm not writing it like I should every day, but I have to because I have a deadline. And I think a lot of writers watching this and you and, I mean, working, on a deadline, can be both good and bad. For me, it's mostly good because it really kicks my ass.
Are they, just as a random aside, is your editor forgiving with your deadline?
Well, this book was very late. This book was a year late.
So yes.
But for the next one, I don't know. Maybe they're going to kick my ass to the curb. I mean, I don't know. They're going to say, "You're out of here, Swinson. Sorry." I don't care how much critical acclaim this got. I mean, you're late. I don't know. No, I doubt that. But they're very, very good to work with. I mean, I love Mulholland. I mean, it's, I think, one of the best publishers in the world.
Do you, when you're writing a book, when you're really immersed in it, do you read anything else? Or do you just stay submerged in your work?
There are books that inspire me that I go back to. Like, for instance, I can't read books that I know are great, that are new, because I might get too inspired by them and plagiarize. And there's a few people, I see here that, I've read the books after. But I'll go back to Graham Greene, Dickens, G.K. Chesterton. I'll go back to reading books. And To Kill a Mockingbird, I mean, it's always my inspirational book, no matter how many times I read it. I mean, I go back to reading the same book all the time for inspiration. But I reserve reading new books when I'm not writing, because I might say, I can't do this. I can't write like this.
I'm also always terrified of reading something and having it and loving it, and then it sticks in my mind somewhere, and later I write it down it's a big fear of mine, and I want to be like, there's no way, and I know there's no way I'm going to write the exact same passage or anything like that, but I'm always nervous that somehow I'll have this inspiration without realizing it was inspired by something else. And yeah, I'm always worried about that, of accidentally plagiarizing like 30 pages.
Yeah, no, I mean, me too. That's why I don't do it. Oh, I see.
Look, I just added myself back in.
Hello.
See, I wanted to ask you, Ed, what are you working on right now? I know you won't ask yourself that.
I mean, I would love to make this more about me, but I figured Dave's book came out today, so it's all about David. No, I have a book I just finished that is with my agent, so I'm waiting on her feedback. And it's about two sisters. Their brother is a troubled jazz musician who was a somewhat abusive jazz musician who was murdered, and one's a former social worker, the other is a masked vigilante, and they are trying to figure out what happened to him. So we'll see.
Is that under E.A. Barnes or under Ed Aymar? I
don't know at this point.
Okay.
With Crooked Lane, who did They're Gone, who I greatly enjoyed working with. I just had a 1-book deal with them. And we'll see if they want this one or if it goes somewhere else. But and if I'm writing under a completely different name, who knows?
Yeah, why do you do that?
Whatever. I just want my books to be hard to find. I want to make sure nobody knows how to find them all to get in one spot. So I probably should have gone with like Z for a last name, to really space them apart.
No, you'd be found easier. Z.
That's true. You're right. Yeah.
I hope that the next time that we have you with us to talk about your books, it's actually in person again, because we so miss seeing you all. And as we talked about before we started, we're hoping to reopen soon, within the next week or two, and not sure when live author events will be happening yet. Publishers are still kind of on the fence about that as well, but I know everybody's anxious for that, and you two are two of our favorites.
If I can just add,
favorites.
If I can just add that One More Page Books was the only bookstore that took a chance on having an event with me when I wrote A Detailed Man, which was done by a very, very small indie publisher, a tiny, unknown indie publisher. And so, I mean, it's my home bookstore. So everybody go support One More Page Books. I mean, go buy your books there.
Thank you. It was
and buy your wine. Wine, and you're still going to have wine, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
and chocolate.
Wine and chocolate.
Yeah. I have the same experience, and I've always mentioned how much I love everyone at One More Page and how great they've been to the local writers here. So everybody watching this, please go. If I didn't mention it enough, this book is fantastic. Read the first 3 to 4 pages, and you'll absolutely have to read to the very last page. I did in 2 nights, and I am a terribly slow reader for a writer. I hate how slow I read. I read such an embarrassingly low amount of books a year. This one was 2 nights for me, and it's fantastic, and I can't recommend it enough.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.
And get it from One More Page.
Thank you. Well, thank you guys both for making time this evening to talk with us. David, congratulations on the new book. Yay.
Thank you.
And I'm excited about both of your new books that are coming up sometime in the future. But thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And if you missed anything, you will be able to watch it on our YouTube channel or on Facebook again, and post even more comments if you want. Thanks.